Hey everyone, we're here in Hong Kong and I'm going to be riding on one of the trams because I'm obsessed with the trams, but specifically the Hong Kong tram. This city is so cool, oh my god. There it is, one of the trams. Why are there so many in a row? Okay, I'm gonna try and get on that one. You have to come in and do these spinning things, and there's the tram. First running in 1904, the Hong Kong tram network is one of the oldest forms of public transit in the city. It originally used electric vehicles, setting it apart from cities like London and New York, which originally had horse or steam-powered trams in their early inceptions. What also sets it apart from New York and London is that it still has a tram network. In fact, Hong Kong still boasts the largest collection of double-decker trams in the world and is a rare case of a tram network using exclusively double-decker trams. This is something that sets it apart from my hometown, Toronto, the tram city of North America, which, although it's called streetcars where I'm from, the Toronto system uses broad gauge trams compared to the Hong Kong's narrow gauge trams. Although that's something that train nerds are really the only people that care about. One thing you'll notice here is that there's actually signs on the top of each of these stops so that you can see where you are from the second floor of the tram, where I am. I think that's super neat. I got to the front of the front of the tram. I got to the front of the tram. Alright, now a quick geography lesson. There's two main parts of Hong Kong Island and Kowloon side. Although there's other areas like, Tunmen, which I did go to see the light rail if you're wondering. But that's not really important to what we're talking about right now. The tram system is exclusively on Hong Kong Island and specifically on the north side of Hong Kong Island. It has one main trunk section, which is what I'm on right now, and then areas that branch off, like I'm going on here because I was stupid and went on the wrong tram. Oh, I'm so stupid. I took the one tram I wasn't supposed to take. McDonald's. I can't believe I made such an unforced error. That's actually crazy. My friend was like, whatever you do right now, there's just one tram you don't take. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. Oh, look at those shapes. Look at that Muji, it's so big. Oh my god. Hello, New York. Anyways, as we navigate ourselves back to where I was before, let's talk about why I love trams. I don't know, I just think they're cool. I grew up in the Toronto area, and Toronto obviously has trams. So why do I do tram tourism? Well, they are something that I grew up with, kind of, and I think that they're really cool. But also, the trams in Hong Kong are specifically double-decker tram, which I think is super cool. I also like to look at how different cities use trams in different ways. For example, in a city like Brussels, the trams go really, Prague especially, the trams go much faster than they do in Toronto. In Brussels as well, they have trams going underneath the subways in some parts, which is absurd to me. One thing I noticed is that cyclists often use these tram lanes as cycle paths that were safer because there are fewer trams and cars. This is something I've also seen used with bus lanes elsewhere in the world, and I think is a really cool example of how multimodal transit and less car-centric transit can have exponentially positive effects. Now, those of you that have been keeping up with my life know that I've been in Singapore for the past 2 months, and I will be for another few months. So, what makes Hong Kong different from Singapore, in my opinion? Well, I mean, one, there's no double-decker trams, but two, they're quite different, in fact, because a lot of the urban fabric of Hong Kong feels older and more colonial than a lot of the urban fabric of Singapore. In Singapore, you have a couple of grids that are scattered throughout in the old colonial centers, especially the ones that were specifically designated to certain ethnic groups. Little India, the Malay Quarter, and Chinatown. But the rest of it is all very squiggly. In Hong Kong, you do this quite a bit when it comes to the mountainous areas closer to the mountains. But elsewhere, it's pretty gridded, and everything is much closer, much tighter packed. You wouldn't see stuff like this in Singapore. And you would see it partially in the city center, but the city center of Singapore is not nearly as walkable as this. Let me explain a little bit about what I mean by that. So, Hong Kong, there are grids, but also generally speaking, it's more dense. And I don't just mean this by density of people. I also mean that the buildings are the urban fabric is very, very tightly knit. You'll see this in some parts of Singapore, such as Orchard Road is a great example of this. But in a lot of Singapore, especially in the heartlands, you'll see a lot of like, HDB estates being sort of like buildings and sort of like empty space or dead space. There's very little dead space in Hong Kong. But you can still find this, again, like I mentioned, in some of the older urban fabrics in Singapore, such as Chinatown, Little India, but also in like Joo Chiat, for example, or Katong. But also in those neighborhoods, the density is much lower than Hong Kong, so it still feels a little different. It feels like a very, like, historic street that you're walking down in Singapore, whereas for Hong Kong, it just feels like that's Hong Kong. But yeah, overall, my thoughts on the Hong Kong trams are that they're really fun and really cool and really quirky. Are they the most useful transit to get people around? Maybe, maybe not. They do have their own dedicated lanes, and that in itself makes it much better than a lot of the Toronto trams. And they are decently fast and at what they do. So on that front, they're great. And they also serve as a solid sort of like tourist thing, but they don't get in the way of other transit. In Toronto, where there are trams or a lot of tram network density, a lot of streetcar density, we don't really have buses. And the trams aren't really fast or great. I think it's important that we prioritize streetcars or trams or whatever you call them where they exist. And it's clear that with where the Hong Kong trams exist, there is intentionality behind it. It's like, okay, this is supposed to be a tram line. Whereas with Toronto, it just feels like we had lines that could be bus lines or could be tram lines. We just have trams because we happen to have trams before. So I think more intentionality would be great when planning any transit. Why did you choose that mode of transit? And I think that streetcars can work great for Toronto. We just don't use them correctly at all. And those are my thoughts. So I hope that was enjoyable, and I hope you enjoyed my enjoyment of the Hong Kong trams.